In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast, James and I, we are going to be transparent. We are going to keep it real. We're going to be 100% honest. And we are going to discuss the prospects that we are having the most difficult time evaluating. Now, for James, the prospect may be easy, and for me, it could be difficult. So we're just going to be honest, and we're just going to share our opinions on some prospects that are a little bit more challenging than others. Stay tuned to find out which prospects are giving us the most difficulty. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board. And my co-host for the day is my brother, James Barlowe. And James,
what's up?
This is an episode that we've talked about a little bit for a while. And a lot of the conversations we've just had, offline, just in general talking, but I decided to turn it into an episode where we just are open. Like, I feel like a lot of times you don't really hear the real that goes on when people are evaluating. Sometimes, like, some prospects are just a lot more difficult for others, and for some, like, a prospect may be easy. So I want to hear your thoughts on some guys that you are struggling. But before we get into that, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. It is the easiest and the most exciting way to play fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Has to be all lowercase, and you can get a first deposit match up to $100. All right. Who is, in your opinion, the most difficult prospect for you to evaluate so far? I mean, we've had, I'd say, anywhere between a 15 to 25 to 30 game sample size. Conference play is about to start in college basketball. Some of the guys that are playing overseas have played 30 or more games. G League has played about 20-something games. So I think that it's fair enough to where we have opinions on certain players, which can change for the better or for the worse. But who's the guy when you just think of, like, man, I'm having a hard time? Who's number one on your list?
Right now, for me, it's probably Ryan Dunn out of Virginia.
We've talked about him in several episodes. I know you've called him a DB, which is like a defensive back. And you're not high on one-dimensional guys. And I notice, I'm your brother, so I've known you forever. But I've noticed that you are not really high on guys that you just don't think have a lot of offensive game.
Yeah, let's just keep it a bean, man. I'm not good with the 3-and-D guys. And it's my least favorite player type, and it's the hardest for me to evaluate because it just, I've mentioned it several times, like, if you're not doing one thing, what else are you doing? And the NBA is an offensive league, so when you're not making threes, what else do you provide that team, your teammates, in a situation? If you are not a cutter, a ball handler, like what else are we going to do when we, at the end of the game or late in the second half, when we've taken away your best player, we've taken away your number one option, we're double teaming Luka Doncic out at half court trying to get the ball out of his hands, and we swing the ball to our center, and the center's playing 4-on-3, and he passes to a guy in the corner. I'm not gonna name any names, but he passes to a guy in the corner, and it's just brick.
So when I hear you talk about that, there's a couple of teams that come to mind. One is some of those James Harden Houston Rockets teams.
Right.
To where you had Gerald Green, Luke, I forgot how to pronounce his last name.
Mute.
You had guys that could defend, that could run up and down the floor, Daniel House, but then it was like when they were cold, the offense just stalled. And then I look at this year's Lakers team. Like, I feel like they have some guys on the team that can really defend, but I think are absolutely unplayable late in the game, and especially in the playoffs. Like we saw with Jared Vanderbilt last year. I thought he played excellent defense, and then he wasn't really playing much in the Denver series. And I just look at the team this year. I'm like, all right, in the playoffs, are you going to be able to play Cam Reddish and Jared Vanderbilt? And so when I look at guys that are 3-and-D defenders in this class that a lot of people are high on, I feel the same way in a sense. Like, all right, what are you going to do when you're not knocking down shots? And so I agree. I mean, it's such a valued position. Every team is looking for wings that can shoot.
Every team.
Well, I mean, every team wants wings that can shoot at the minimum. So there are teams that want guys to be able to do more. They're not just looking for shooters. But I'd say instead of labeling guys 3-and-D, I'm starting to label guys 3D and cut. Can you at least do those things? But even then, I feel like I prefer guys that can put the ball on the floor and make a play. But if you really think about it, how many wings in the NBA, just off the top of your head, can defend, knock down open shots, and attack a closeout?
I can name a lot of them, actually.
A lot. I mean, Boston has 2.
Boston has 2, but also their guards aren't 3-and-D guys.
But, I mean, mostly wings, though.
Right. So Boston has 2. I feel like if the Clippers have 2.
All right.
That's 2 for sure. But let's talk about the Pelicans. The Pelicans have 3, in my opinion. All right. Now, Herb isn't the best shooter, and when Herb isn't making shots, you can take him out of the game, obviously. But Herb can pass.
Yep.
Herb is good in transition. He just doesn't shoot the ball well enough. Now, with
much better shooter than he was in college.
Yes, it's a work in progress,
Yep.
right? So now, when that's not working, what do? They go play Troy Murphy.
Yep.
Troy Murphy is 6'10". He has a burner, not a playmaker, but 6'10", cutter, super athlete, right? And then if that doesn't work, they'll play Najee Marshall. Yep. Najee Marshall, respectable 3-point shooter, but he can grab a rebound, he can push, he can, if you chase him off the line, he can put the ball on the ground and he can hit guys. He can create. That is what I would prefer instead of, like, again, no disrespect, made a lot of money, but like when Reggie Bullock went cold 2 years ago, like what did he offer?
Just good defense.
But even then, we have to go down on the other end of the court and we have to play offense.
Yeah, because even if you're playing good defense,
you're going to get scored on.
You're locking up the best player. You make him shoot 6 for 20. But if you aren't making any shots,
exactly,
that best player, even if he shot 6 for 20, he's probably got to the foul line 6 times. So you still got outscored at least.
And he's
12 to
he's still tilting the defense either way. You're not locking anybody up 1-on-1 in the NBA. No, guys are too good. But I just feel like on the other end of the court, if we can put our undersized point guard or our big on you because we just don't respect you, then it's hard to score. And points are always going to be at a premium in the NBA.
So how does that relate to Ryan Dunn, in your opinion?
All right, so again, Ryan Dunn, I get the defensive counting stats, but ultimately, if he's not a screener, where can you put him at on the court where the defense has to respect him?
I've already said Ryan Dunn to me is not a difficult eval because I'm like, he is going to be a 5.
It's not you though, right? I mean, it's just like we got a guy that's shooting, and I'm not hating on Ryan Dunn. I drafted him. I sent him to a great situation in our mock draft, which was Indiana, right? I think Troy. I think Tyrese is a miracle.
I don't know where he's going to play at Indiana.
I feel like he can play the 4 in Indiana.
All right, they got Obi Toppin, they got Jarris Walker.
I mean, again, they're deep at every position, so they're gonna have to draft somebody.
Bruce Brown. So I don't
know if Bruce is gonna be there long term.
I mean, I don't know if he is, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know if Indiana offers him immediate playing time. You would think it would because they need help on defense. But that was supposed to be what Jarris Walker was supposed to do. That was supposed to be his appeal as a defender.
I get it, but Jarris is either not ready yet or, maybe...
he's better than Ryan Dunn.
Again, we're talking about a situation. Hey, man, that's between Rick Carlisle and them. But I'm just saying, if Ryan Dunn is a 22% three-point shooter, we don't respect him as a three-point shooter. We don't respect him putting the ball on the ground. And we don't respect him as a playmaker. Is his great defense worth giving it all up on the opposite end of the floor, and we have to go back and play offense. So if Indiana draws Philly in the playoffs next year or whatever, right? And let's say they do draft Ryan Dunn, like, who do you think they're going to put on Ryan Dunn? They're going to put Tyrese on him, Tyrese Maxey. Tyrese is going to chill. He's going to rest and then come down the other way. He's got all the energy in the world to get downhill and attack. And if you really want to, whatever, you may say, Embiid, look, we know, big dog, you run out of gas every spring. We just going to put you on the power forward that doesn't shoot. So now he's clogging up the lane, and he can help, and he can rest, and then come back on the other end and go be a bully and try to get 20 free throws.
Yeah, I think it goes both ways. I think on one hand, you put like your Ryan Dunn, your Jared Vanderbilt, you put them on the other team's best player and allow your best player to guard the other team's worst player so he can relax. But then it flips on the other hand because the other team is doing the same thing. You got your Lucas, your Hardens, your Trae Youngs. You got all of those guys, and you just say, hey, you know what? You go guard this non-threat to score. Save yourself on offense, cheat, play the passing lanes, help us get out in the open floor. So I get it. All right, when we return, I'm going to talk about my hardest eval. Now, the guy that is the hardest eval, actually, I got two. But the guy that is the hardest eval for me, it's not going to be a popular one. I know a lot of people are very high on him, but I got some questions. Even though his strong play of late, I don't have the numbers to back it up. So stay tuned to find out who I'm talking about. But before we get into my hardest eval, I want to talk to you about PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. All you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players, and it is just you versus the projections. You're not playing against the sharks or the bots or just these experts. It is just you versus the numbers. And with basketball season here, you can pick combo projections across football and basketball at the Specials League. For example, LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combination of three-pointers made and receptions. That's what makes PrizePicks so exciting because they have this combos league. And then PrizePicks also offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So for a football and a basketball game, if you have a guy that exits in the first half with an injury, doesn't return in the second half, he is rebooted for the next day. And PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So go to prizepicks.com. You have to use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA in lowercase letters, and you can get a first deposit match up to $100. So again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It is called Locked On Sports Today. It is here for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, covering the top sports stories from our local experts and our national shows. So go check it out, Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Subscribe to the first ever national 24/7 streaming channel. All right, I teased it a little bit. The player that I'm having the hardest time evaluating, and like I mentioned, he's had some strong games out of late, so I don't have the numbers to necessarily back it up.
So you're going to sound like a hater then, right?
And I'm going to sound like a hater, but I'm being totally honest and transparent. And I've actually talked to some NBA scouts who've had the same issue, and it's not... I think if you look on other like mock drafts and so on, you won't see the same things that I'm feeling. But anyway... The player is Kyle Filipowski. I'm having a hard time evaluating Kyle Filipowski. On one hand, I don't like boxing him in, but sometimes I do put him in boxes as what is your role. So when I look at bigs, I want my big to be a defensive anchor, either a vertical lob threat. Actually, I need you to be a vertical lob threat and a defensive anchor. I don't know if I can have you only do one.
So you don't want Christian Wood?
I mean, how many teams has he been on? But he's more talented. But he's more than a vertical lob threat. He just doesn't play defense. So I want a vertical lob threat. I either need you to be a floor spacer, defensive anchor, or I need you to be a beast on the block. And there's only a few guys that are a beast on the block that teams are going to give the guy the ball to on the block and say, go to work. So for me, this can be like a blind spot in a sense to where just the style of play and the style of players that I like, a guy doesn't necessarily fit in a box in that category, and that's Kyle Filipowski. I don't think that he is your Şengün or your Jokic type low post player. I don't think he's
Not even close.
A guy that you can give the ball to on the block and say, hey, man, go to work, go get me a bucket. Now, the percentages this year tell me that he's shooting 62% on post-ups, which is totally fine. But I see a guy that struggles with athleticism. Like, he gets a lot of his shots blocked. And I've seen teams put smaller guards on him, guys that aren't as physically strong as he is, and they're able to find his body and block his shot. So he's a below the rim low post scorer. I don't think he has like great moves and great power. I don't think he's like a guy that you can literally give the ball to in a block in the NBA and say, go get me one. I don't think he's the type of player that a team is going to give him those keys. He's not a vertical lob threat, not a bad athlete, but he's definitely not like your quick, twitchy, bouncy vertical lob threat. I think he's a good team defender, but I wouldn't say he's like an anchor of the defense. And then up until recently, I had real questions about his outside shooting as a floor spacer. I know he's had a hot streak, and he's up to 37% from three. So that kind of answers that question.
So Duke has played 15 games this season. Games 1 through 14, he was shooting 31% from three. All right, he went 4 for 4 the other night against Pitt, and that boosted him to 37%. So I get what you're saying, and if somebody's like looking at the box scores, I'm like, what you mean he can't shoot? He was not efficient, but that hot shooting night last night boosted it to make it look like, oh wow, he really can shoot like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say between last year and the first 14 games this year, he was hovering around 30%, which is not bad. I mean, it's respectable, but
he was built as a shooter.
I mean, right now, like I said, the numbers don't support my concerns as a shooter because he's at 37%. But how many games have they played?
15 games.
According to my numbers, he's had his shot blocked 23 times in 15 games. So that's over one blocked shot per game. So if you're getting that on the college level, I don't understand how you'd be able to not get your shot blocked at a high rate in the pro level. Now, I'm a big Zach Randolph fan. I know Zach used to get his shot blocked. I think he used to lead the league in getting his shot beat. But Zach Randolph was a different level scorer than I would feel more comfortable with Zebo on the block than Filipowski. I don't think NBA teams are going to allow him to exploit mismatches. So I'm having a hard time like figuring out his role. I know the comparison that I've seen a lot is Mo Wagner. And I think if he is Mo Wagner, that is fine. Mo Wagner was a late first round pick, and I've done the research. If we did a redraft from Mo's draft, I think there's about 6 or 7 guys in that class that are out or not playing as well as he's playing. So that would put him as a mid-first round pick in a redraft, which I think could be fair for Filipowski. But again, I know it's going to sound crazy. The numbers are good. He's playing at a storied program. He's a fan favorite. I just have some reservations, and he's a hard eval for me.
I get it. Mo shot 38% for his career at three. For his career from the three at Michigan. So, but again, if you...
And hold on, I want to add, Mo went to a situation in L.A. where he was able to play early as a rookie. And because he was able to play early as a rookie, I think it helped him out in his second stint with his second team. So with Filipowski and how I view this rookie class, I think a lot of the rookies are going to spend a significant amount of time in the G League. And I just wonder, like, what team does he go to that he can come in and contribute early right away? Because, I mean, we're seeing lottery picks in what was considered a strong class struggle to get minutes. So that's why I'm a little concerned about Filipowski's fit. And I think he is going to need a Jaime Jaquez situation where he goes to the perfect team.
What's the Jaime Jaquez situation for him?
I don't know. That's why he's a hard eval for me.
How do you feel about his playmaking and passing?
I think he's a good playmaker and passer, but I feel like in order to maximize in the NBA your strengths as a playmaker and passer, I think you have to be a really good scorer.
Kevon Looney?
Perfect situation. But, I mean, I think with Looney...
But Looney can pass, though.
But also with Looney, I mean, he definitely dumbed down his game. If you ever watch his old high school highlight tapes,
his hip dumbed his game. His hip dumbed his game down.
But he had a role. He's playing a role as like this defender and rebounder. Now, can Filipowski possibly do that? I don't know. I mean, can he be your defender that you can close a finals game with? I have a hard time seeing that, which we've seen Looney do.
That's true. Filipowski, like I said, I see the talent. I think he's athletic, like we had mentioned in a previous podcast. He's on the ground athletic to me, if that even makes sense. Like I see him. He can attack, close out, and show signs of quickness there. I think if he plays with like a dynamic point guard who's going to command a double team and he gets to play 4-on-3, I think you'll get to see some of his talent there. I want to see the shooting stay at that high clip, but
yeah, because the numbers don't. I mean, he's shooting 42% on catch and shoot jumpers, 37% from three, and 38.8% on jumpers overall. So he's eased some of those concerns, but I think over time, he's still only in his second year. He did have the reputation. So I do think that he can develop into a floor spacer. I mean, I've seen Kelly Olynyk.
He has to develop into a floor spacer.
I think he has to. I try to not always go with like complexion comparisons, as you would say, but Mo Wagner and Kelly Olynyk are the two guys that come to mind first.
To go on the opposite end of the complexion comparison, I said Naz Reid, but Naz Reid has had success in the NBA is because he has a burner now.
Yeah, I think Naz is a little bit more fluid also.
Yeah, he handles the ball more. He has a nice little carry that he gets away with.
Yeah, I think he's more of a... I think I'd be more comfortable with him creating.
Yes, but ultimately, like, we're talking about below-the-rim, offensive-minded centers who don't play with their back to the basket. And that's, to me, what Kyle Filipowski will have to be.
All right, when we return, we have a few more prospects that we need to cover. I mean, we've only covered two so far. James is going to share some wings that he's a little bit concerned about. And then I have another one that I think people are going to be shocked about. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you about Jase Medical. I know we come to sports to escape from some of the craziness and the crazy realities of life, but can we just talk a little bit about preparing for real life? And according to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics right now in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade, which is scary. I can't imagine like my son or a family member or someone I care about that is sick and I can't get them the medication they need because of a supply chain issue. And that's where Jase Medical can come in at. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics that treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis. I just had that. That's terrible. Skin infections, among others. So go to jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. So go to jasemedical.com and use the offer code LOCKEDON, and you can get $20 off your first order. All right, last segment. And actually, I mean, I have several more players that I don't know if we'll be able to squeeze into this episode.
Maybe we can run this back.
So we may have to run it back. All right, so we talked about Ryan Dunn. And you said he was a hard eval for you because of his lack of offense, and you are not high on 3-and-D guys, but guys that just play defense and only play one side of the floor. DBs, defensive backs. Mine was Filipowski. I'm having a hard time putting him into a box. I think again, that sounds negative, putting him into a box. I think he's like in a sense, a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And I think with guys like that, sometimes it works out, and then sometimes they have a hard time fitting because, they don't fit the description of, like I said, for me, a vertical lobster, a floor spacer, a defensive anchor, and so on. So it's back on you. Who are some players that you are having a difficult eval for, just based off of your personal preferences?
All right, so these two guys are looking like lottery picks, and I know the draft Twitter loves them, but I still have my concerns, and they fall into the 3-and-D category. The French boys, man, Risacher and Tidjane. It's I'm not arguing against their shooting right now. Both guys are shooting like over 40% from three.
I think Tidjane's about 38. And I mean, I guess combined. I know Tidjane, last I looked, he's made like 17 of his last 25 from three.
Yeah, so guys are scorching hot. I'm definitely buying the shooting, right?
And Risachet's are like 40.
Yeah, Risacher looks like, it's crazy. But what happens when they are not making threes? And that's always been my issue with 3-and-D guys. Like I said, it's a little different with Ryan Dunn because I'm probably never going to guard Ryan Dunn. He's going to have to prove it to me for years that he can shoot. Whereas these guys, I respect them. So we're going to have to respect them, respect their spacing that they provide. However, if they're not making shots, what do they have to offer? I get it. I'm buying them as lottery picks. That's cool. But long term, I want to see them put the ball on the ground. The teams that make it far, the teams that have the success from their role players, because your stars are going to be great, or you know what you're going to get from them, unless they just wet the bed. I mean, that happens. But great teams in the playoffs get help from their role players. Last year, Miami's best role player was, I looked it up to make sure I had the right twin, but it was Caleb Martin. Caleb Martin doesn't just stand in the corner. He can put the ball on the ground. He can initiate pick and roll. He can set screens. He can be the roller, score in transition. Against Boston, man, he looked like, man, if he had a contract situation, he was going to get paid.
And that actually sounds like Bruce Brown. Set the screen. He was a jack of all trades.
He's a jack of all trades. We need you to keep the defense honest, but I need you to do more than just stand there and shoot. Christian Braun, he didn't shoot the ball well for the Nuggets, but what did he do? He cut.
Energy.
He ran over Jimmy Butler one play. Like, that's a big play. If you look at the year before, Golden State, they don't employ 3-and-D guys. But if you look at their role guys, like, okay, we'll say Jordan Poole was a role guy. Bucket. Andrew Wiggins is a reformed scorer turned into a defensive stopper.
25.
He averaged 25. Yeah. I don't care what you think about Andrew Wiggins. 25 in the NBA is 25. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, let's take those two teams and talk about them now. Who is their surprising rookies that they've drafted? What do they do? Jaime Jaquez. All right, I got numbers for you, Ralph. I like numbers. 25% of his plays, according to Synergy, are spot up, yes. 18% are in transition, but 15% of the time he's playing pick and roll, and we know that he cuts, and we know that he posts up. His transition looks aren't corner threes either. Like, he's running to get dunks and layups.
He's filling the lane.
He's filling the lane. And so somebody may say, oh, well, what do you think about Duncan Robinson? We know he has a burner. Duncan Robinson, 18% of his possessions are in pick and roll. He fell out of the rotation a couple years because the league figured out the handoff action. But when he started dribbling the basketball, he became more effective. They ran off Milwaukee in the first round, right? He sized up Drew Holiday, premier defender Drew Holiday, and hit him with the same rocker step that Jimmy Butler hits everybody with. So he's a threat to put the ball on the ground.
And he's not a defender, so he's not a 3-and-D guy.
Right.
But he moves, so you can't just say he just stands in a corner.
Exactly. So there you go. His movement is enough where it's like, okay, maybe he's not, getting to the free throw line, but we're not putting Trae Young on Duncan Robinson because guess what? Trae Young is going to run out of gas chasing him off a handoff action, and he's a good enough passer to know that if you double team or that big steps up, he's going to hit bam, and now your defense is broken. Lastly, Podziemski, again, he's playing. He's more than just a stand in the corner guy. Now, 32% of his possessions are spot ups, but 16% of his possessions are in pick and roll. So again, my thinking, if I know I'm drafting in the 20s or just in general, I want guys, shooting can be practiced. It can be built upon. We've seen it. We've done it in the gym. We've helped turn a guy go from a 27% career shooter, almost shot 40 one year, right? Mm-hmm. So that you can change. I feel like it's harder to give a guy some boogie off the dribble. So going forward, yes, Tidjane, Risacher, love that you guys can shoot, but ultimately, your ceiling to me is going to be, can you put the ball on the ground? I favor guys that can put the ball on the ground and can shoot, because ultimately, you got to be able to do everything. And it looks like, in my eyes, the teams that climb that mountain, that in there, their rotation guys aren't just standing in the corner and shooting the ball. I'm sorry I got on a little tangent, but
no, it's all good. I've talked to a scout, and he was asking me my opinion of Risacher since I went to see him in person, and he was like, he thinks his best case scenario is Michael Porter Jr. Now, Michael Porter Jr. is kind of relegated to the role as a 3-and-D guy, but he's a good cutter. but he was a gifted scorer before, the back injury.
If Michael Porter Jr. back wasn't stiff,
I think maybe if he was on another team, you'd see him have a little bit more of a role as a scorer.
He has the ability,
Yeah.
but he just physically may not be able to do it, or he's like, you know what, I'm putting the team first.
Yeah, I just think the situation in Denver, like, either you accept your role. I mean, what are you going to do? Complain about it?
He's got a big. You can't complain about it. You get shipped off to the Clippers.
Yeah, I mean, but he's got a role. He's scoring. I mean, he's got his money. So only thing that he could want more of is just shots. But I mean, I don't think you leave that situation. Or I'll say this about Risacher. I do have a hard time, even though I have him at number 3 on my big board right now based off his play. I do kind of struggle with taking a guy that high who has shown very little creation off the dribble. Now with Tidjane, I think, and they're about the same size. I think, and I've seen both, and I watched both play in person. I think Tidjane could be a screen and roll guy also. I think that he's wired differently. Like, he's an athletic, energy guy. I think he would be a better cutter. I mean, I think Risacher is better now, but I think Tidjane may have a higher ceiling while he may have more. I think they both have some boom or bust potential, but I think Tidjane could end up being that guy to where, all right, we're going to play you at the 4 and we're going to run screens for you because he's such a good athlete, and I think he can be a vertical lob threat. Now, another guy, and I'll make this brief, that a lot of people are really high on, his stock has slipped up a little bit, that I'm having a hard time evaluating, trying to figure out a role for him, is Ron Holland. Ron Holland is not a good shooter. And I got some numbers for you. And I will put into context, Tidjane is only 18, Ron is only 18. Risacher is young. So these guys are really, really young, and they have plenty of time. But I'm just being transparent as far as like an evaluation. Ron Holland. So he's a guy that I think he's best suited in a high usage role. Even though, I mean, when he was younger in high school, he didn't have a high usage role.
But he wasn't.
But he was playing the 4.
Yeah.
So I think he is best suited for a high usage role, but he's not the decision maker or passer that you would want in a high usage role. Again, I know he's young, but he has 57 assists and 74 turnovers, which the turnover number has gone down because at one point it was like 5 a game, but that was heavily impacted by 11 turnover game. He's shooting 24% on jumpers, 25% on catch and shoot jumpers, and 28% on unguarded jumpers. And there are several times when you watch the film, he's wide open and he passes up the jumper because he wants to get into the lane and shoot, which is fair. But one of the reasons I'm having a little bit difficult time evaluating Ron is because I'm like, what position is he? I know he's a wing, but he's not right now, your 3-and-D cut wing. I don't think he's creative enough on offense to where you can give him the ball and create a bucket. I think he's easily sped up. You know that he's going right. Like, I don't see the craftiness. And I mean, I guess there's flashes, but I don't see like the craftiness of a one-on-one scorer. And so I'm like, all right, in a half-court setting, like, what is his role right now? Plenty of time to develop into a shooter, which I think will open up every part of his game. But offensively, when he's not heavily featured like he is with the Ignite, where they're running everything through him in a sense, how does he fit in with an NBA team? So that's why he's a tough eval for me.
What do you say to the people who say, well, I could say the same thing about Jaylen Brown coming out of college?
That's very, very fair. Jaylen Brown coming out of college, I didn't think there was anything that he did well. I think that, I mean, one, he worked on his game, and there are people still like give him a hard time because his handle isn't the tightest. I think some of the reason why his handle is not good because he's got like small hands. He's got like crazy wingspan with little hands. But Jaylen Brown worked on his game. So if I'm Ron Holland, I am going to the Jaylen Brown School of Player Development. I'm like, what did you work on? Brown was a guy that I liked coming out of school. I think I liked him more than Holland. And I think maybe part of it is sometimes their expectations are totally different. Like, Jaylen Brown wasn't billed as the potential number 1 pick. Everybody was in love with Ben Simmons that year. But I think Jaylen Brown is bigger. And I think that the situation is different. I think the situation with Ron, where like he has to succeed. Like, I mean, the G League Ignite need him to succeed. So I wonder if is he learning? He's getting valuable experience, but I wonder is that going to be detrimental to him because that's not going to be a situation next year.
What if he's drafted by the Wizards? They're going to let him hoop. They have other guys, but ultimately, like, they're not going to sit here and say, "Hey, man, I need you to do this." They're going to like go hoop.
I mean, that's a possibility, but I think you have to. I think sometimes letting guys hoop creates bad habits. So I mean, like I said, he's a tough eval for me. Like, God forbid he goes to like the Pistons. You know what I mean? Like, I think there are some teams that it would absolutely be a terrible, terrible, terrible fit for him. And if I'm drafting a wing that high, I don't think there should be teams where it's an absolute bad fit for you on a really bad team.
I get it.
Because even if you say Risacher, you can say, all right, if he goes to Detroit,
he can just stand there and shoot.
That he spaces the floor. So that's why Ron is a tough eval for me. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. I mean, I had a couple more guys on my list, and I'm sure James did too. So we want to let you get in on this. Who are some of the players that you are having a hard time evaluating? Like, I've talked to NBA scouts, and one of the common themes that I've heard, and we could probably make this an episode, is are teams seeing the players from 2023 class that are struggling because of their lack of shooting? Are they going to factor that into this class? And how is that going to impact where guys are drafted? So are you having a hard time evaluating non-shooters in this class? If so, let us know. Once again, it's Rafael Barlowe with my brother James, and we are out.